Welcome to the Zealous Podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Snyder. This week, Ashley Goodman is with me. She's the Director of Player Development for Kansas University's football team. Formerly with the Green Bay Packers, she's now in the NCAA and going to tell us all about what she does for KU. Meanwhile, go to SatantacCollege.com if you're interested in getting a Master's of Science degree in Applied Sports Biomechanics and Movement Science or Applied Sport and Exercise Psychology. They've got programs also for performance coaching and sports injuries and return to performance management. Remember, SatantacCollege.com. Enter RS10 for 10% off your tuition today. And if you want continuing education, go to my website, RockySnyder.com. We've got CEUs for athletic trainers, physical therapists, chiropractors, strength coaches, and personal trainers. In-person workshops around the country, as well as online courses, RockySnyder.com. And click on to Instagram and follow us if you haven't already at Rocky_Snyder.com. Hit the subscribe. Here we go.
Absolutely. Thank you again for having me. I always love talking about what I do. I have the passion for it, so it's easy to talk about it. So a little bit about where I started, how I even got to this point at being at KU. Sports was always, it came natural. It was something of a strength for me. People recognized that was an area that I thrived in. I loved, I had the passion, I had fun, I enjoyed it. While school was more challenging for me. So I think it gave me that good balance of learning how to be competitive, not in areas that I'm the strongest in, and just wanting to have that mentality of whatever I did, I wanted to be the best at it, even if I, naturally wasn't good at it. So I think sports gave me that confidence to bridge that gap into academics. But, really early on, I had a very progressive high school volleyball coach who was, at that point, you didn't really see women in the weight room and be encouraged in that form. And, she did. Her and her husband, they had a well-respected volleyball program. And it was one of those things that I started weightlifting going into my ninth grade of high school.
Where was this? Where'd you grow up?
So it was Northern California, Castro Valley.
Castro Valley, all right.
Yes. So within that, had some time there, but then also just with me being passionate about the weight room, it was something that I was like, well, I want to do this for life. I love the environment. I love what it brings. I love the competitiveness of it. And to be honest, I didn't know what that entailed. I didn't have family that worked in sports. It was just something that I loved and wanted to pursue. So within that, went on to get my undergrad in exercise science, kinesiology, despite having all my a lot of my instructors in kinesiology say, do not go the athletic route. Do not go healthcare. But I was like, nope, I'm going at the athlete route. I think for me, not fully understanding what I was going into was not the best. Of course, you always kind of want to be prepared on what you're walking into. But I think also I was never, growing up, I never thought of, myself being any different than my brother and cousins. And so I didn't ever think that I was going to have such a challenge on getting opportunities being a female. And believe it or not, we are still at 14% of women in strength and conditioning across the board in collegiate sports. And that's just insane to me that we're still at the same point that we started with. And so, as much as I loved the weight room and built the relationships with athletes and coaches, it got to a point where, again, having one foot in college and one foot somewhat in the pros, I had an opportunity to after my GA-ship, after I was a grad assistant at University of Nevada, working with, under Coach Alt and that staff, I went and started working for Michael Johnson, who's an Olympic track and field athlete in Dallas, Texas.
You were with Lance? So
I
you were
was
with
with
Lance Walker?
Lance Walker. And he's been another great mentor. He's probably top 2, 3 in my book of just being elite at what he does. What I appreciate about Lance is that despite who you are, where you came from, if you're good, you're good. And that's just what he wants. And so I respected that about him, and just his knowledge about the body and coaching. And so worked with that group for a few years, then went back into college, Georgia Tech as a strength coach, with under Coach Johnson when he was there, with Georgia Tech. And then, at that point, that was 2017, I had already been, coaching now 13 years, 14 years. And I started feeling as though I wanted to explore and grow a bit more in my own profession. And I didn't know if that was going to be really what happened if I stayed in strength and conditioning, to be honest. And so, that was a hard maneuver. I would say even harder than me maneuvering out of sports into, real life adulting, is that decision to step away from strength and conditioning and go into another field. But to be honest with you, like, this position has a lot of similarities on why I went into coaching. And so I think that's where it kind of bridged the gap, that this position, this role, I'm still coaching. I'm just not coaching in the weight room.
Okay. I've got a boatload of questions, and some of them are non sequitur, and some of them are going to go right along with this. So first of all, Niners or Raiders? You grew up in Castro Valley.
Yes. Funny enough, my father was born in Chicago. And so when he moved to California, Southern California, when he was 10, but he remained always
Bears.
a Chicago team. It was the White Sox, the Bulls, and the Bears that I grew up with.
Okay, well, I moved out from Boston, so my daughter was raised with all New England teams. So I appreciate that. And you had some good runs. I just have a hard spot in my side for the Chicago Bears because they beat my Patriots the first time there. Okay, well, that's cool. And then at Georgia Tech, what sports were you strength conditioning coach for?
So I worked with women's basketball and women's volleyball, and then helped out with football.
Okay. So did you play football by chance?
No, I did not.
Okay.
I played volleyball.
Okay, that was my next question. Did you ever come down to Santa Cruz to the main beach and play on the sand?
Oh, you know it. Absolutely. Beach volleyball. I will say now, of course, I was court, but the sand, there is a true passion. It is much different, but it is that is a passion. That is love right there.
Well, there's people on the beach all day, every day, no matter what. They're still. So anytime you're coming back to the neighborhood, you want to come down to the main beach, it'll be there. Okay, but let's get into the real meat and potatoes here. Athletic performance, player performance. Why don't you just give me your actual exact professional title with Kansas?
So I'm director of player development for KU football.
And what does that entail? Because you're out of the weight room. You just said it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you really take the thought process that at the end of the day, college, pro, this is a business. And what now I do is I coach, athletes on how to enhance their careers as an athlete, holistically, through intentional programming. And so what that really is like developing them holistically to be a pro on and off the field. That's how simple I can put it. Is I am responsible for all personal, professional, and financial literacy I deal with a lot of different realms of what it consists on being an elite athlete. Everything that entails your life, your relationships, psychology, everything that incorporates how you're going to build your platform to be an elite athlete. That's what I help assist them with.
So you've got basically it's mental strength conditioning, spiritual strength and conditioning. I mean, you may not be in the weight room, but you're still doing a lot of the same things in just a
Yes.
different vehicle. That's
Absolutely.
fantastic.
Absolutely. And that's what I think, before I made the jump into this full time, I did my homework on just making sure that this was going to be, a role that I was going to be passionate about. I wanted to have the same passion that I had for strength. And so what I did in 2018, went to the NFL Combine. Most of my contacts have been with football, for multiple different reasons. I've worked with football, but then Lance, with the relationship with the Cowboys, that helped develop even more so with just working with pro. But I would say that uh, with this position in 2018, I made the trip out to Indy, and just talked to 12, 13 different DPEs, what the NFL calls director of player engagement. And that's where I really started honing in on what this role consists of, what the NFL really does to help develop players off the field, to help them on the field. And if that position, if that role would be something that I would fit into. And, to be quite honest, like I said, I feel like I have just as much passion for this as I did for coaching in the weight room. So I think it was a great transition for me at this point in my career. Do I know if I'm going to remain in this position forever? No. But it's one of those things like that I hope at some point I get to oversee all the departments that have a current hand on our roster, and how we're really communicating effectively within department to department or department to player. And so that's really what I'm looking at long term when I'm in this role right now.
Now, you'll have to tell me if this is correct. I imagine that every NFL team has a DPE, but when it comes to D1 college, is that the same case, or are you a rarity amongst college sports?
So no, I would say for the most part, majority of Power Five programs will have this position for a few different reasons. One, because now more than ever, college programs are looking very similar to what the NFL is doing. We have a GM, we have very similar roles of what a front office would look like in a pro system, and so this position isn't rare in that sense. However, it could be used differently. And I say that because the NFL has mandatory programs across the 32 teams. Everyone knows what that role does, what needs to be completed within the mandatory programs. When it comes to college athletics and college D1 football, we don't have mandatory programming. And
Mhm.
so it's really it could be based off what the head coach wants, or it could be based off of, if the head coach is allowing or having that person in this role implement and design programs and put on workshops that are going to help develop them holistically. That's a few different ways. Now, again, I think at this level, it's really dependent on that head coach, which is why I really am pushing that D1 football will do the very same thing of what the NFL is doing. Mandate all the programs, so whoever is in this role knows exactly what needs to be done. Again, on the same par of what the NFL does. Now, despite whether or not they go to the NFL or not, it's still a holistic program that consists of personal, professional, and financial development. And so I think within college, it should be the same criteria as what the league is doing currently.
And so, do you put on workshops for, well, obviously you mentioned financial literacy, but is this an ongoing thing throughout the school year where you're going to be doing personal development, financial literacy, we'll say, and other aspects? I mean, do you have a number of workshops that you just kind of circle through, or do you work with the individual athletes? I mean, you've got what, 70 plus athletes on the team, right? How many athletes are on D1
So
football?
we are currently at 122.
Well, that's quite a client load for you, I would say. So is it something that you can have touch points with every single athlete, like one to one? Do you make a point of doing that? How does that work?
Yes. So great question. Great question. A few different ways. One, before I took this position, Coach Leipold, who never had this role before, it was a learning curve for him. I was trying to teach him as much as what I do in my position, just as much as I was trying to get buy-in from the locker room. However, going into my third season, this will be my third season with KU. I really made it simple. At this point, before I even accepted the job, I wanted to know that the head coach and the GM was going to support what I was going to bring in and implement. And so I wanted all my workshops to be mandatory for all the players. And so all of the workshops that I do, I will have 6 to 7 different workshops within the spring as well as the summer. And then during season, no workshops. It's just focused on X's and O's. And so I do a few different things. One, I look at the locker room. What is our low hanging fruit? What are some things that we really do need to work on? If it's communication styles, if it's relationships, I always tell parents or recruits or anyone I'm working with, like, I can't assume that you're coming from a home that's provided everything that you're really going to need to be successful in life, despite football or not. And so I have to do, ground level work, because I could have players that are coming from homes that don't have a whole lot of support to those that have a lot of support. And so it's going to vary. So to answer that question, I have mandatory programming that in workshops that we do during spring and summer. And then when I see anyone that's struggling, if it's for certain reasons, personally, professionally, I will work more one-on-one with that individual if there's individual needs. I manage a lot of different things, from legal. If anyone gets into issues with law, I deal with attorneys. I deal with anything conduct relation. Deal with mental health. I deal with NIL, name, image, and likeness. I'm dealing with just making sure that contacts and networking for guys to do internships and, think about life after football, put that on. And so it's a variety of different topics that I'm really covering, but it's just going to depend. Some will consist of everyone. Some will only consist of those guys that have more potential to go play in the NFL, or vice versa. Those guys that are just needing help to transition into the workforce and get internships and get their resume put together and cover letters and networking events. And so it just is going to depend on who I'm dealing with and what the situation is.
Okay, when it comes to these workshops,
Mhm.
are the arms open or are they crossed over the chest? Like, what do you receive with this?
Yeah. Yeah, a little bit of I would say a variety of feelings within this. Some topics I'm going to bring in people that are going to talk about healthy versus unhealthy relationships. Now, to like 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old males, that may not sound all that appealing, But believe it or not, that some of those workshops are actually eye-opening because they want to discuss about that. And they want to, I made it the first very thing that I wanted to do for this program is implement more mental health awareness, and talk about it more openly. Coming from the Packers, they had a full-time sport and clinical psych. Not all NFL teams do. And so that was a big initiative that before I took this job, I wanted Coach Leipold and our GM to back that up, to have more resources available to guys. And so, we certified all of our guys for QPR training. We made sure that guys understood, red flags. And so I would think, with those conversations, I think you get a mixture, but I always say, even when you don't think they're listening. And so I always just keep plugging away, because I know at some point it may not hit them right then and there, but it's going to, because I keep on reiterating a lot of the key points that I'm trying to make. And the speakers that I bring in will try to reiterate what the messaging we're trying to relay to them. And so, this past summer, I brought in the NFLPA to come in and talk about agents, taxes, had the NFL come in, talk about transition, how to maximize your time here as a collegiate athlete, and then what to expect, how that maneuvering takes place, to then go to the next level. I had, a workshop this summer based on gambling, the addiction of gambling. Again, if anyone's in that headspace or could be potentially injured, more likely that they would then start seeing what they could do, while they're in that space. And so I try to just give our guys information. It's never anything that I'm thinking that they're going to be professionals after one workshop. I never think that. With our financial literacy, I tell guys, this takes multiple conversations to have about budgeting and investments and savings and taxes. And so, I think it's just a continuing to have the intent dialogue with them about what I'm trying to get them to understand.
So you mentioned like low hanging fruit. I can see that probably when it comes to your workshops and topics, professional turning into a pro is probably one of the most uh, sought after kind of. You have all ears and they are paying attention to you because
Yeah.
this is their dream to make it to the NFL. What about on the other side? What is the hard to reach fruit for these guys? Like, what topic do you know that it's going to be crickets out there? I know, even though they don't seem like they're listening, they
Mhm.
are listening. But what subject's that?
Well, I would say mental health is still one that you're not going to get a whole lot of chatter about. I
Because the
will,
stigma. Yeah.
because yes, but I will say, after going into my third season, I will say right now we have about a third of our team utilizing therapy. And so, that's quite a bit of our starters. And so when we have our starters speaking up and referring guys, that's what I wanted. I wanted guys to not always think like that I was suggesting going to therapy. I wanted it to be teammate to teammate, identification on that. So in that realm, I think we're making progress, but that's still a heavy topic that they don't want to, necessarily be vulnerable about in that setting. I would also say a hard topic is what comes next after football. For some of our guys, they don't want to even think about it. And I get that. I totally understand that. And I always communicate like this. I say, I am never going to be the one to deter you from chasing your dream. I would have been the last person to listen to anyone when they tell me, no, I shouldn't do something. And so I recognize that. But I say this, we can do two parallel plans. We can do our plan for the NFL, our career in football, our career in sport, but we can simultaneously see who we are outside of that as well. That doesn't like just exploring what potential, occupations we would have passion about, or be good in, or have the ability to travel or live in a certain place that you want to. What are those options? So I really just put the question out there that we don't need to necessarily shut the door on football. We can do this simultaneously, and it will actually help, maneuver that transition when that time comes. We don't know. There's very few of us that actually get to say when we call it quits. And so I might as well, explore some things and just be consciously, thinking about it rather than not thinking about anything, get no call back from a team. And then I'm devastated because I didn't get the call and I need to make money. So we're now into this, extreme of, and this is where we've seen downfall of athletes, is the depression, the anxiety, the lack of money management, addiction, everything within that. We're trying to help, lessen that experience for them and make that transition somewhat of a growth opportunity.
Sure. Well, I'll say right now, when it comes to mental health, if we were to just change the title to mental strength and conditioning,
Yeah.
the door would be a lot more open. There's something about mental health that just sounds like I'm already starting in a deficit. But mental strength and conditioning, or something of that effect,
Yes.
mental skills development,
Yes.
something like that. Huge.
I totally agree. How I state it is, I'm a former strength coach. We would never think twice about going into the weight room. We need to get bigger, faster, stronger. We never think twice about that. We never think about prehab and rehab. We don't think about that. If we get an ACL injury, we don't think we're weak because we got to go to rehab. We think like that's what we need to do to get back on the field. And I explain it's the same thing. Our mind is another muscle. We need to work it just like everything else. And so I really do try to limit this factor of like, oh, there's something wrong with you, that there's an issue. And so that's far from the truth. And I'm very open and, honest with our guys about that.
Well, so how do you create a needs analysis? How do you make an appraisal or an assessment for over 100 athletes from all walks of life, all positions? Is it an objective or subjective questionnaire, perhaps? Is it a multifaceted ways of appraisal? You already mentioned like we're hoping player to player would recommend this and that, but how do you understand where your entire team is at any point in time?
Yeah, well, I think it's a great question. I think that's why we have those department head meetings, to always touch base. I think, if our director of equipment is hearing something that I may be missing, we can communicate and relay that. I think that's where, any missing issues or player issues that, not all of us are aware about. I think that's where, again, solid communication from top to bottom up is going to be key. Some of the other things that I do is surveys. I simply ask them, and it's one of those things like no one else sees them but me. But I want to see like, what are things that you still struggle with in the sense that you don't think you're prepared for? What are more resources that you feel like we need in certain areas for you to develop, in financial, in professional, in personal. And so then like we had 24 incoming guys, report June 1st. And within that, I onboard all of our new players that come into this program. That means making sure that they know each department, paperwork, all of that, just getting them acclimated into the environment and, pretty much being their go-to on, what they need to be doing those first few weeks until they get their feet under them. And then, right after I gave them, a couple weeks to adjust, and then I had one-on-one meetings with all of our new guys on just seeing again, where are we at nutrition wise? Where are we at sleep? Where are we at that we still feel like we're struggling? Where's our time management? And just areas on how they're doing, how they're doing, being away from home. We just got an individual who just got here in June 1st and is already injured. And so that's a big, blow for a young player. And so I think it's just, again, touch points, understanding and communicating with our staff, nutrition, equipment, strength. We're all very much together in the sense of what's going on with who. And so that's where I do rely on getting information is from others, or the student athlete will just come to me directly and say that there's, a situation.
Well, that's really refreshing to hear. I'm thinking that there is a little pushback or reservation because, no offense, I mean, this is to generalize. You're in the Corn Belt. You're in kind of like a good old boy country, and we're talking football. It doesn't get much more. My neck doesn't turn much more red than when I'm
Yes.
thinking about football and in the Bible Belt and the Corn Belt and so on. So here comes this California lady who's talking about all these things about player enhancement, and she's going to whatever they want to say.
Yeah.
Did that happen? I guess that's what I'm wondering. Or did all of the department heads go, oh, right on, we've completed the circuit. This isn't a gap that we've been needing to fill, and now she's here. So when the sports scientist is looking at sleep cycles here on this staff, or they're looking at other aspects of their GPS or whatever technology they're dealing with, they're
Yeah.
like, okay, there's fatigue here. We got to send them over to Ashley. Something's going on. Let's see if she can sort it out. Is that pretty accurate? Is that what's been going on? Or are you feeling like, man, they just, not to put anybody under the hot seat or anything, do you feel like there's some people that just aren't getting it? They're like, oh, okay, this is my third season. Maybe by fourth season, they'll understand the efficacy and the potency of what it is that I'm offering these players and the team as a whole.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think it's like any other sport. I don't think this is unique with football. In that sense, I think everyone is going to reach a certain point at their own time. The only thing I can do is meet them where they're at. Very similarly to me going in as a strength coach, I would always have high expectations. These are the expectations that I am requiring. And I will say, we had a lot of cleanup work to do with this program. When Coach Leipold came in 2021, keep in mind, this program was not a winning program.
No,
It was
it
far,
wasn't. In
it
fact,
was
no one thinks of Kansas when you think of football. No offense.
no. And exactly, this is a basketball school. And so
Hell yeah.
we had to change. Not only did we have to change the community's point of view, but we had to change our locker room. And yes, there's times where, Coach Leipold and the staff, we have high expectations, but guys have to know our culture is what is going to make or break us. And I think adding me into this mix, one, I think that the experience that I have at the next level, I think gave me some, at least bonus points to win over with guys. But at the end of the day, this is just like coaching. If you don't have a honest and a really solid relationship and trust with these players, you're not going anywhere. You're not getting anything. And that's what I've done. Like I know it sounds simple and it sounds like, oh, that's it. No, that takes time. It takes time to really invest in people, and keep in mind, say, some of these guys have a lot of trust issues. I keep on saying, like, some of our guys don't come from great backgrounds. And so breaking that cycle, or, that takes time, with just making sure that I stay consistent with our players. I'm always available. Like, I always tell our guys, the minute that you step like into my office or you need something, everything else drops, because I need them to know you are my priority. I don't have a job without you. And so over time, players recognize and understand I'm straight with them. Like, I do not BS with them. And to be quite honest, is I care, and they know that. And so I think within that, I've had some hard situations being here at KU, much harder than I had to deal with the Packers.
Such
Um,
as, give me an example without naming names, obviously.
yeah, attempted suicide. We've had legal issues, like I mentioned about right going into me starting this position. So not only am I just trying to grasp what's going on, but I'm trying to now help two young men not just throw away their lives. And so I think that the aspect of me coming into this role and this program was cleanup. This was a lot of cleanup work to do. And we're still not there. We still have a lot of cleanup, but we are getting to the point where our standards, guys are recognizing we're not moving. We're not adjusting our standards just because you're uncomfortable. Because, to be quite honest, previous staffs let them do whatever they wanted to do.
Got
And
it.
so with breaking that, we tell them you have a choice. You can either buy in and hold up to our standards, or you could be weeded out. Those are the two choices within this. So we don't shy away with guys that if they are not cutting it and they're not doing right by KU and this organization program, we have no issue saying that you probably should find another home, in a sense, because we want people to represent KU and all of us in the standard and the manner that we, expect from them.
All right. So when it comes to your role as director of player development, Kansas football, I see you having to have a, a good background in financial wherewithal, financial literacy, shall we call it, effective listening and communication skills. Obviously, you've come in from the gym up into the office here, so you've got a good understanding of the strength conditioning aspect. What other elements would you recommend to a person entering a position like yours at another college or university? What other skill sets are strongly needed or required?
Yeah, I would say networking is a huge thing for me. When I come into a program, I don't want to make this role sound like it's all negative. It's not all negative. However, I do cover my basis that when I take a position, and I'm not from the state, I'm not from the school, I did not graduate from KU. That one, I get to really know and recognize local police, campus police, attorneys, that I have that baseline and solid. Probably the first week or two, I have that down. I do that for multiple different reasons. But that is something that check the box. That is step number one in a sense, while getting to know players. The next thing is being really adaptable on that maneuvering. And you could get the call at 3 a.m. Unfortunately, like a situation, 3 a.m. and you got to be ready to go. And so in that mode, I think if you're not good under pressure, or you struggle in that realm, I think that's something to improve on. I think you're going to have to conduct yourself in a manner that you feel like, okay, one, you can lead, but then two, you're not going to freak out everyone else that is, dealing with the same situation. And so I think that's a crucial role. I think then also using your resources around you. You know, my right hand person, he played here. He's from Kansas. I use him in the sense of networking, mechanics, um, you know, local organizations to do volunteer work, anything that's dealing with alumni base. You know, just getting to know the surrounding areas. Use your resources around you to have your book and your go-to people. So when guys come in and say, "Hey, Ash, you know, my car's not working. I need a mechanic," you have someone you can give someone who's reputable, who checked out, we trust, and we know you're good. So I think those types of things really have accessible to you so you can provide for student athletes. The next thing is understand how to work with coaches. If you've never worked with coaches, that's another big aspect of just learning how they communicate. They don't want to read a whole lot. So make things, you know, quick, concise, easy. They understand it, get in, get out, and be done with it. And so I never had worked with this staff before. You know, I was recommended, GM called me, that's how I got in this role. So you're going to have to learn the system of a head coach and a system that guys have worked together. You know, a lot of our guys came from Buffalo with him to KU, and so they kind of already had a good system working, or what the system they felt comfortable with. And so you got to adapt and kind of learn that system, even though, you know, you're an outsider in a sense, and you got to kind of learn that culture. So I would say those are huge aspects. Communication with head coach, just knowing your resources around you. And then again, local police force, attorneys, anything that negatively could come up that you haven't handled.
All right, give me a story of something that was incredibly rewarding for you in this position. Like, because I know you're painting a certain picture that is not the whole picture, and because you're talking about the things that really need to be cultivated, worked, shaped, and reformed.
Yeah.
But aside from that, there's moments I know in the last 2, 3 seasons here that you're going, this is why I do what I do.
Yeah,
Yeah, give
absolutely.
me a.
Absolutely. You know, well, again, we do this because of relationships. That's what we do this for. But you know, I could give you multiple. There was one, you know, he was our kicker. He came in with the staff before us. We didn't recruit him. Great kid, but was struggling. He was an overthinker. He was a perfectionist, as a lot of specialists are. And so, you know, I think he was struggling because he was also in a position where he was soon to graduate, and he was coming to some sort of realization that he was dealing with some injuries. And so he wasn't 100. He wasn't performing the way that, you know, he expected himself to. He was on his, you know, last season here. And I think he just really had a lot of anxiety about why am I not perfect? And I think I can completely relate to that because of my own, you know, being. But I think when I get the chance to have guys feel vulnerable enough to open up and feel like they can express things that they really have not expressed to a whole lot of people, I feel honored in that way. I feel like little by little, even though they're children and they still do things that irritate me, and like I'm like, oh my God, this again. Um, but I think those are the moments where I'm like, okay, this is why I do what I do. And then, you know, he transferred and transferred to Vandy for grad school, and is, you know, played there. But then, you know, I would receive a letter and a text just thanking me for just always being there. I think what these guys just really need is just to know that someone is going to be there, good, bad, or ugly. And I think it's one of those things of just walking with them, and not being afraid of telling them or letting them know I may not have all the answers, but I'm never going to BS you. I'm never going to give you answers that it's just going to be easy for me to get you out the door. We're going to have some hard conversations. But that's why we do what we do. And then we have, guys that I've seen the last 3 years, and they've grown, they've actually matured. And I was like, whoa, that's, 180 from, what we had dealt with, year one. And those are special. And then they, get to live out their dream. And I love that, because I love when people get to live out their dreams. That's my whole thing. So, if they can make it to the next level, and they've grown and they're succeeding in life, that's of course why we do what we do.
Sure. Well, I can only imagine there's probably several moments throughout the year where you have to kind of realize again that the athletes that you're dealing with, although they're plus size humans, they're still encased in an adolescent brain
Absolutely.
that still hasn't fully developed. And won't be fully developed. I mean, if we consider like neurology, until they're at least 25. And so therefore they're either in their PhD or they're gone or whatever.
Yeah.
So that must happen quite a bit.
Oh yes, it happens quite a bit. I have to, it's funny to me because I work with these guys day in and day out, and then I'll deal with someone, I'll deal with, a legal issue, or I'll deal with them trying to set up their utilities, which they've never done before, on an apartment they've never rented before. And they'll say, well, he's an adult, he needs to be doing this. And I'm thinking, he's okay, he's 18, so I guess you can consider him adult. He's not an adult. Yeah. Don't think that for 1 second, because
he's 6'4", he's 275 pounds. He looks like an adult, but in truth,
he's not. And so that's where I'm like, oh my gosh. And I have to remind myself, in the sense that I'm dealing with children. And when it's just a dispute, I was like, I was being the referee between two, I'm sorry I even have to say this, two guys, two roommates who one was messy, one was the other, and they were having this dispute of like just living situations. And they were like, it seemed like to them it was the end of the world. It was like, how can this be? You're not taking the trash out. I'm not that dirty. It was like going back. So I was the referee on having a conversation on picking up after yourself. Okay, if there's certain things in the common area, let's just try to be better at picking and cleaning and doing everything. So I feel like I hate being referred to the mom, but it's like I have these conversations and I'm like, when did I become this mom? Like I used to tell them to just do up downs, or like go squat. And so now I'm like dealing with kids that are like, you're dirty and I don't want to live with you. And I'm like, oh my God, this is what I'm dealing with now. So yeah.
Okay, how about big sister? Maybe you're just big sister. That you're not old enough to be their mom for sure. Okay, so is there a consortium? Is there an association across the NCAA for people in your position? Or is that something where you're talking about networking? I just have to reach out to the people I know.
There is not there is no conference. There is nothing. Now, Edward Jones, who is a great friend of mine, actually used to be in this role with Coach Miles. He's been doing a lot more initiatives. A group of us have been pushing a lot more of having annual conferences. We've had, 2 so far. They've both been on Zoom. However, we're trying to implement that. This is something that needs to be, developed. It needs to be something that, just like DFOs have their conference, and video and video has theirs, and coaches have theirs, and strength have theirs, that player development should have their own. Now, I will say, going back to the NFL, the NFL has really established this position more so than any other pro league, any college. And so right before or after the combine, they will have their own DPE groups of discussing issues and anything that maybe is implemented, any changes that are coming up from the league, to what teams are needed to be aware of. That will take place. But I'm trying to push Big 12, and I have meetings about having this conference have a mandatory program design for all of Big 12 football programs, and then hopefully it continues that we're recognized and to have an established conference each year.
That would be cool. Well, you got the NSCAA Coaches Conference in January.
Yes.
Have you thought of presenting there? They may still be accepting applications. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So like Ed, we've been kind of going back and forth that we've wanted to be a part of that, even if it was like, a session of, a few of us communicating and having dialogue, and also communicating with coaches on what this role is. Not all coaches will recognize what this is. And so I think, yes, we've been in communication and talks with them to try to push that.
Right on. All right. Well, I know we're I've taken up so much of your time, and I really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate it.
You seem to have that open door policy for your athletes. But what about for aspiring professionals in the same field, or just maybe thinking about going into this aspect of sports performance and player development and so on? What's the best way to contact you? Can they go through LinkedIn, Instagram? What do they do?
Yeah. Well, I will also say, I didn't mention this before, but not only football, like technically within the college, not only football would have my role. If people are also interested in student athlete development, like we have our KU leads that focuses on Olympic sports. And so I'm with football 24/7, but there's a whole, department of student athlete development that focuses on all sports. And so I don't want to just have anyone think that it's only football. If you're not in football, you can't do this. So in college programs, there will be student athlete departments that do very similar work that I do on my day to day. But for those who would like to reach out and contact me, you can always reach out LinkedIn. I'm on IG Ash Goodman 23. So either way, I'm on Facebook, Ashley Goodman. So I'm pretty easy to reach out to or to get in contact with.
And as far as your department at KU goes, do you have grad students that have internships? Like, do you accept internships within that program or department?
So I have a student worker that is we get a lot of our student workers from our sport management program here at KU. And so that is typically who I have working with me. The first year, I did have a former KU football player assisting me in that role. But at this point, it's typically student workers that will work.
Right on.
Yeah.
Gosh, I can't thank you enough. This has been wonderful. I really appreciate it. Again, I've already said it, but your time I know is limited, and to take time out and to share it with the audience, I can't thank you enough.
No, thank you so much. Again, I love talking about this, and as much as we can promote and inform, it's all worth it.
And that's a wrap for the Zealous podcast for this week. Thank you, Ash, for coming on, as well as KU for letting this happen. Remember, setantacollege.com, RS10 is the code to enter if you want 10% off your tuition. Get a master's degree within the 18 to 24 months. Go to rockysnyder.com and get to my website if you want some CEU credits. Maybe it's time to revamp or renew. this is the time to do it, RockySnyder.com. And, of course, Instagram at Rocky_Snyder. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and we'll see you next week.